So I guess I'll start with like childhood and stuff. Could you tell us what Melvin was like as a kid?
Well, we were just typical boys. We lived on a farm in Iowa, and well, wasn't much to get into because it was way out. I think our nearest neighbor was about a half mile away, and so that's where we learned to ride a bicycle and just get into whatever trouble we could on a farm.
So you guys got along?
Most of the time. No brothers ever get along all the time, I don't think.
Did he get along with others?
Oh yes, yeah, he was very. Had a girlfriend in the first grade.
So he wasn't
Little redheaded girlfriend. This was a little, basically just a little one-room schoolhouse, but he came home with a girlfriend the first day he went to school.
So he wasn't like a troublemaker or anything?
No, not at all.
Do you know what he wanted to be when he grew up?
Well, he went right straight from into the Air Force, right out of the high school, and so.
So he wasn't like drafted? Or?
No, he would have been drafted because that was during the Vietnam era, and so he rather than get drafted into the Army, he joined the Air Force.
Did he struggle in school? Or?
To say the least, I think it took him about 7 years to get through high school.
Oh yeah, I was doing my research and it seemed kind of weird, like the years.
Yeah.
Were you guys in the same school?
Well, when we were in school, yes. When we moved here to the area, we were down in Poquoson. And I graduated from Poquoson, and then we moved up here to York County, and he graduated then from York High.
What type of music, or do you know what type of music he liked, or movies?
Well, that was back right about the time he got drafted. That was the time of the Beatles, but both of us mostly listened to easy listening type music, like soundtrack from the James Bond movies were some of our favorites, and of course Dwayne Eddy. I've got picked up a CD of the old album that he and I used to listen to all the time, and once in a while I'll put that on when I'm cruising around, and it's just like him being in the seat next to me.
Mm-hmm. So he joined the Air Force right after high school. Like, what was your reaction to that? Were you scared, or?
Didn't give much thought to it because that was basically the better of the two evils, either that or the Army. Mm-hmm. And so,
did you support the war?
I did not join the war.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in the shipyard, and so I had an occupational deferment.
Oh, my dad works in the shipyard currently.
Okay.
So did you have any contact with him while he was?
Oh yeah, we had letters back and forth, and so I didn't bring any of the letters from him, but all the letters we received from him, I've got the ones that he sent me and the ones he sent Mom, and they sent all this stuff home, and I'm not sure what happened to the letters that we sent to him, and so because they shipped all his stuff home.
So, what type of personality did he have? Or?
Well, he liked the girls, I guess is the best thing. That's part of the reason it took him so long to get through high school. Because he had back in high school, he had a 49 Ford pickup truck, and bright red. And so that used to be the thing. He used to drive that back and forth to school. And so he just, he was always a car type. If anything goes wrong with my car, I just take it to the shop and say, fix it. But one Friday afternoon, he came home from school, pulled the engine out of I think he had about a 52 Chevy at that time, pulled the engine out of it, worked on it all night, Friday night. Saturday, got the engine back in the car, got it going so he could have a date for Saturday night.
So he was, his priorities weren't really on school anymore?
No, it never was on school. But the interesting thing is he didn't do very well in school, but he was in the top of his class in all the classes he had in the Air Force.
That's good.
So he flip-flopped there. He took the effort after he got into the Air Force anyway.
Could you show us some of the stuff that you brought? Or?
Yeah, I've got got several different items here because one of the things they did was back in the back during the Vietnam, they had these bracelets. I didn't bring the little bracelet I had. They were just called the friendship type bracelet, and some of the articles that we had about that I got a picture of him along with some information about that, and some of the newspaper articles that were in there had one guy that wore the bracelet, and of course returned it to us after my brother was buried up in Arlington, because we took him 41 years to find him because he was shot down in '68. They found the plane this crash site in 2008, and they investigated that for about a year, of which this inch-plus document identifies. And well, then there was the pilot and my brother were the two that they had a positive ID of, because they sent me a packet, I guess it was 2008 after they found the crash site, and I sent them a blood sample to allow them to make a positive ID of his remains. And well, he's basically, as I say, buried in Arlington. He's got his own tombstone up in Arlington, and in addition to that, he's got all the remains of the guys that they could not find. They put those in a group gravesite and had one large tombstone for all of them. And so I got pictures of those tombstones. This is my brother's tombstone, and then this is the group tombstone. It's got everybody's name that was on their plane at the time when it crashed. And it took them 41 years to get them home, but they flew me out to Honolulu, out to Hickam Air Force Bases, where they repatriated the remains. And so I went out there and escorted his casket from Honolulu back up to D.C., up to Arlington. Got him buried in Arlington then.
Could you tell us about like his life in general, or?
Well, we're just typical boys as far as I can tell. We just had little scraps here and there, but for the most part we got along, because when we lived on a farm there was only him and me, and so the two of us we got along most of the time, because we're always building forts. And we used to, Dad fussed at us one time because we had haystacks, had baled hay stacked up, and we restacked the hay so that we could make tunnels through the haystack. And he fussed at us because he said he was going to fall through one of those holes and break his leg. And so, but we just did all kinds of boys type stuff, climbing all over the barn, climbing trees, and just not racing our bicycles. After we learned how to ride a bicycle, we was always putting little ramps out in the driveway and trying to jump off those ramps then. But just having a good time on the farm, entertaining ourselves.
What was you guys' age difference? How old were you?
I was born in September of '43, and he was born in June of '46, and so about 2.5 years. And so.
What brought your family to Virginia?
Roundabout way when Dad, his family was in Iowa, and so after the war, then we went up to Iowa and lived up there for about 12 years. And Mom, I guess her family was from Carolina, and so she wanted to move back down close to Charlotte, a little town called Albemarle. And so we moved down to Albemarle then for about 2.5 years or so, 2.5 to 3 years. But Dad didn't like it down there, and so he ended up basically went up to Richmond, worked up in Richmond for about a year at our ironworks up there, ornamental steel, like making ornamental rails and ornamental storm doors and such.
Okay.
Then he went down to work at the shipyard, and that's what got us here.
So what were your general feelings about the war?
Well, I didn't have much feeling other than the fact I didn't want to get into it if I could. And shipyard was obliging in the fact that they gave me an occupational deferment. And so, and last time that my brother was home, I was living over in Hampton at the time, and he came by one Saturday, the Saturday before he went back into his last deployment. And we were sitting over there at the pool talking, and he said, if there's any way you can stay out of this mess, stay out of it. And so, that was his recommendation, stay away from Vietnam if you can. And I said, well, I'm here in the shipyard. I'll stay here until things settle down.
Did you know the nature of what he was doing? Did they tell you he was in Laos or anything at the time? Or?
Well, we knew the bases he was on, and I can't recollect all those, but all I know is that he was a loadmaster on the C-130, and so he was responsible then for prepping the loads for drops. And so anyway, all I know is that on the last mission, they had a night mission dropping flares over Laos or over the enemy zone. Okay. And it was on their way home, and they they weren't too far out from the home base when they lost contact with the plane. And I think one of the group circled back around where they lost contact with it, and they saw some fire on the ground, but that's the only thing we had to go on until 40 years later.
Oh, wow. Do you remember where you were when you first got the notification? Did you know it?
Oh yes, I was in it was in May of '68, and so I was prepping for final exams also. You always said you had an exam in here just a minute ago, but
Yeah.
I was in college. I went down to NC State, and so I was prepping for final exams when Mom called and told me that his plane had been shot down. And so it was at the time, well, we did not feel like we had really lost him. All we knew is that he was missing. And so that sort of gave you some hope and sort of hold on to hope until you have anything else to go from. And so never really gave up hope, hoping he would come home.
Were you thinking that he was possibly like a POW or something at that point?
Well, that's typically what we assumed. We just assumed that everything was, that the plane had just gone down somewhere and that he had been captured.
Okay.
And so that he'd become walking out of the jungle one day.
Yeah. Have you looked into the C-130s very much?
Well, I'm into radio control model airplanes.
Okay.
And so, yeah, in fact, every time I see a C-130 fly over, I, of course, stop and watch it fly. And one of the guys in the club has got a model of the C-130 flying, and so I enjoy watching him fly that airplane. And it's all sort of reminiscent of him. Reminds me of my brother.
Did you know any of the people like in his squadron or anything? Did you have any contact with them? Or?
No, never had any contact with the squadron itself, but during the group funeral that we had up there, all the families got together that evening before they had the funeral the next day, and so I got to know some of the families that way. And so this was just during the funeral then.
Like, did he know any of them before the war, or just like keep friends with them?
That I don't have any idea.
Was he based in Thailand during the war? Or during his service?
I think so. I'd have to, you can probably look through here and find out, but in fact I got an article here written by somebody that was in the same type missions that he was in, and it identifies what basically their duties were.
Okay.
And so
Was it like a candlestick? Was that kind of what they were doing? Like dropping the flares over the...
that, as I said,
Okay.
they're basically in here is just referring to it as as a blind bat mission.
Okay.
And so, sort of blind bat just implies that they're trying to provide light for the GIs to see what's going on down on the ground.
Right.
But I'd be glad to share any of this information I've got here because I got the investigative report. Will not be leaving it with you, but you're welcome to look through it and see if there's anything in here you want to make copies of.
Okay.
And there was a couple articles in the paper and there's a little brochure, or not a brochure, just a little pamphlet type thing about the laboratory out in Honolulu where they investigate the remains.
Did they ever determine the cause of the crash?
Oh, it was shot down, basically. That's all they had, because when they went down in the jungle. Interesting thing is that when they found the crash site, about the only thing you could find was the big landing gear, because the Vietnamese scavenge scrap metal.
Oh, wow.
And so anything that can be carried away was gone. And so, surprised they even found, in fact, they even carried the bones away, because they would try to sell the bones to the government, to our government. And so, of course, one time I think they had some bones, and they didn't pay for the bones, but somehow they were able to identify that they were animal bones and not human bones. And so the Vietnamese were just trying to get money any way they could. And of course, scrapping the scrap metal, the aluminum on the superstructure on the aircraft was easily carried away, but the landing gear was just so big and heavy, along with the tires or the such. Couldn't carry that away, so that was still there on the site, and so they were able to make a positive ID of the aircraft in 2008, and then they started investigating the site. It looked like an archaeological dig, because they were going through, they'd set it up in quadrants, and they'd just take all the dirt and dig up a foot or two down, I guess, and sift it, and anything that was relevant, put it in a basket or in a bag it and bring it home and investigate it.
So when it was happening, were you like involved in it? Like, were you like watching the news and newspapers about the war? Were there reports of the war during the time? Or was it?
Oh, there was talk about it also, mostly mostly protests. You know, I don't know if you know anything about it, but there was a big effort. That was back in the Make Love Not War era of the 60s. And so most of the guys that were young enough just didn't have anything, were not supportive of the war effort.
Were you?
I didn't, as I said, all I wanted to do was just stay out of it, other than the fact I didn't have any any strong feelings for or against it. I know some of the guys my age, they protested it so much to the fact that even some of them, as you remember, went up to Canada to get away from it. Or I assume you've heard some of those stories about some of the young boys. They just relocated to Canada until everything died down.
Wasn't he promoted to Master Sergeant after his death?
Yeah, post-mortem. Yeah, so they carried him as missing in action for about 10 years.
It was 2009 when they.
That's when we buried him. But they carried him as missing in action for about 10 years. And then so from 68 to 78, he was just carried as missing in action, which means he continued to be paid and continued to be promoted. But then in 10 years later, after 68 and 78, then they made a declaration of death. And so.
How did your parents deal with the status as MIA? Did they continue to hold out hope?
Well, we all continue to hold out hope. The unfortunate thing is that Mom and Dad both passed away before we brought them home.
Right.
And so I was the eldest. And so I basically brought them home and got them buried in Arlington. But Mom and Dad both had already passed away by the time we found out what positively happened to them.
He has other siblings too, right? Like,
I'm sorry?
Are you his only brother? Or did he have a sister?
At that time, there was only the two of us. My sister is 13 years younger than me. And so after we moved away from Iowa, we were living, after we moved away from Iowa, my sister was born then. And so.
So how did she deal with the whole?
Well, as I said, we all just held on to hope that he's coming home. Never really gave up hope. And so.
How old was she when he was in?
Now I got to do the math. Because she's 13 years younger than me, and that was in 68. That means in 68, that means I was 25, and so that means she would have been about 12. Can't think much of anything.
I don't think so.
Do you have any other kind of funny stories about growing up together?
Well,
That sticks out especially?
in high school, a time or two, we did, not at the same time, but we did date the same girlfriends. That was rather cute because we lived down in Pocosin, of course, and then some of his friends were in Pocosin, and then he went to York High School, so he had some friends up in York High School, but some of the friends down in Pocosin, he'd be close to the same age. He and I both being close to the same age. We had a couple of the girls who we did date. He had dated, and as I said, sometime later than I dated and such.
Right.
But that was just rather cute there about the fact that we had some of the same girlfriends.
Were you guys involved in any sports or extracurricular activities, especially?
In school, he was in the Little League.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't too athletic. I more academic, and so he was more interested. Well, not more. He was interested in sports, and he played Little League for a couple of 2 or 3 years anyway that I know of. And so,
He graduated from York High.
yes. Yeah. It seemed like I remember he graduated in '66, and
He was in his 20s, right, when he graduated?
yeah.
Okay.
In '66, that would have been, yeah, he was either, yeah, he probably just turned 20 when he graduated. Because I said he was born in 66, or not 66. He was born in 46 and he graduated in 66, and so, and since his birthday was in June, he was either 20 or just turned 20.
Yes, too. Did you feel our government did enough as the war wound down as far as retrieving
Well, According to the investigation here, they had a lot of false leads because they was always investigating. And so from what I can remember in the report here, they investigated about 3 or 4 different sites that were just turned out to be false leads because they were other sites like a helicopter down or something like that. It did not have a positive identification of the aircraft until they actually were able to, I think the landing gear actually had some numbers on it that they were able to positively identify the aircraft that he went down in.
Did you do anything after this? You went to the shipyard, or
Yeah, I went from the shipyard and then I went down to NC State and had an occupational deferment. Then I had a student deferment, and so I graduated from down to NC State got a degree in engineering. Came back to the shipyard for a couple of years. 'Cause basically, I had a shipyard scholarship, and so I agreed to go back to them for a year for every year, and so went back in '72 and left in '76, and went out to work on contract in NASA. And that's where I retired from here just a few years ago.
So you had a Corvette hat?
Yeah, I got a couple of them too. Everybody I have two. And one of them, that's the one I told you about where once in a while I put that CD in there about Dwayne Eddy, because that was our song that we used to, when we cruised right, well, back in '63 I had a convertible. And so he and I used to ride around in my convertible there. One of the crazy things we did that was one Saturday, I guess it was, it did not get over 30 degrees. It seemed like it was about 27 degrees. And being macho, we put the top down. We were riding around town in that convertible on a 27-degree day on Saturday. And so, but anyway, one of my Corvettes is a convertible also. And so every once in a while I'll just put that Dwayne Eddy Rebel Rouser song on. And yeah, that's the name of that song that he and I used to listen. That was our favorite on the whole album. And so
What year did that song come out?
that was in the early '60s. Yeah, cause can't remember the exact year, but as I said, I got a CD of it now, so can't play the albums anymore. But put a CD in my car. I got a CD player.
So how old were you when he went to war or joined the Army?
Yeah, when he was killed, then I was 25 at the time when he was shot down, and so.
Any other information you might want to share?
Well, sure.
About,
Think of little stories like that one about not the Corvette there just a minute ago, but put you on the spot. It's sort of hard to remember little things.
Yeah.
But you're welcome, as I said, to look through what I got here
Okay.
and either make copies of it or
That'll be great.
get the information you want out of it. Anything else?
Anything else you can think of? So do you have, with your own story, do you have a wife and family eventually, or?
Yeah, I've had a couple wives, but
Okay.
no children.
Okay.
And so, it's,
And you have a sister you said too?
yeah, she lives.
Area?
Well, in fact, she lives about halfway between here and where I live.
Okay.
Right up here, there's Virginia Trailer Sales and Repair.
Oh, wow.
Up here, Mom and Dad built a house back in there, and Dad bought about 7 acres of land.
Okay.
And he tried to, well, he offered the land to my brother, to my sister and me both to build a house on it. Dad and I didn't get along that well, so I didn't take him up on it, but my sister took him up on it. And so
Okay.
her and her husband built a house right next door to them.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. Well, we appreciate your taking the time.
All righty. Glad to help.
Yeah.